Welcome to the Long COVID podcast with me, Jackie Baxter. I am really excited to bring you today's episode. Please do check out the links in the show notes where you can find the podcast website, social media and support group, as well as a link to buy me a coffee if you are able. You should not rely on any medical information contained in this podcast and related materials in making medical, health-related or other decisions. Please do consult a doctor or other health professional. I love to hear from you. If you've got any suggestions or feedback or just want to say hey, then please do get in touch. I really hope you enjoy this episode, so here we go. Welcome to this episode of the Long COVID podcast. I am very excited to have my friend Iain with me today.
Hello.
We have known each other for an awfully long time, so this is quite exciting.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
So can you maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure, yeah. My name's Iain. I'm a musician and teacher, same as Jackie. We studied together. Jackie was a couple of years above me, and we were organising a project over the summer of 2021, pandemic time. And Jackie was talking about the struggles of long COVID and the problems that brought up. And I found myself surprisingly able to understand and empathise and suggest things because my partner, Cal, has various long-term chronic health conditions, including chronic fatigue. So me and Jackie ended up talking about things quite a lot, and I was able to empathise. And then you asked me on to talk about partners and relationships with chronic illness and fatigue and all these things. And if I say anything clever or insightful, I want it to be known that it's definitely Cal who came up with the idea.
Yeah, exactly. So I think you might be able to offer a helpful perspective on it from having experienced it for longer.
Yeah, hopefully. And obviously, to clarify, Cal does not have long COVID. We all caught it over Christmas 2020, but fortunately, we managed to avoid the worst effects. So I am not coming in here thinking I know what anyone's specific problems or troubles or struggles are. I'm just giving some advice based on my experience, but I am entirely possibly completely wrong. One other minor point of order is Cal, my partner, goes by they, them pronouns. They are non-binary, and if you're confused if I'm referring to multiple people or not, it's just Cal is them, not her or him.
So would you be able to talk a little bit about your relationship with Cal, and were they ill when you got together, or was it something that happened afterwards?
Yeah, so me and Cal have been going out for about 3.5 years-ish, give or take a couple of months. And yes, when we did start going out, they were ill and had been ill for a long time. It's a mix of various mental health problems and the stuff that goes with them, as well as kind of chronic fatigue, which, to be fair, wasn't that prevalent at the beginning, has come on a bit more in the last couple of years. So Cal was ill from the start, and I think in some ways that's probably made it easier for the two of us, because unlike most people who are in a relationship and have long COVID, that has probably come along and changed the dynamic quite dramatically, I assume. That's a big shift in what everyone has to deal with, whereas we go to build things from the start.
Yeah, so that wouldn't have been easy, I'm sure, but maybe at least you went in with your eyes open.
I almost certainly would have been a mess. I certainly at that time was very, very empathetic and did not necessarily have the boundary setting skill for myself to be able to not want to help out and make everything better all the time. And it was very much Cal who, from the beginning of the relationship, helped me into it and was very good at, while I was helping them out with various things, also making sure I was safe and kind of making sure I had my own space and all of that.
I think it's very easy for people who are very ill and long-term ill. You're obviously so deep into it that it's very easy to forget that there are other people that are suffering and affected by it as well. Partners, families, children.
I mean, yes, but also that kind of goes with it is, from what I understand, like often a huge amount of guilt for having to rely on said people. So it's this,
It must affect both parties.
yeah, it can definitely be all consuming for the person going through it. Absolutely.
So, how does Cal's illness affect your life?
It's hard to say exactly because it's been around since the start. Like, I can't necessarily point to what exactly would be different if Cal wasn't ill, because that's a completely different reality where everything is utterly changed. But I would say there are a lot of good things and a lot of bad things. And I say bad things, I'm not saying that these bad things have been imposed on me. I think that's something that's worth acknowledging. Like, if you are in a relationship with someone who is ill, you're signed up for the whole shebang. You're not with your partner just for when they are happy and having a nice time. It's, yeah, richer and poorer, all of that. And I think that we often, and this is something I have found particularly useful. I'm aware I'm not answering the question. A way that our relationship is framed a lot between us is that we are a team. We're a very good team. And it's not that Cal is having a rubbish time or not able to pull their weight or any of this stuff. It's that both of us are a team. We're both doing everything we can to help each other out and ourselves. And it is not me positioned against Cal and the illness, but the two of us dealing with that together. Because while I may be putting in a share of physical and emotional labor, they're having to do so much more to manage it. And just because it's happening inside their body and their head doesn't mean that their efforts should not go unpraised, unsung. I'm not sure I can answer the how does it affect my life question that well, but to kind of take you through maybe a bit of a timeline. So when we started going out, I was aware of the illnesses in their various forms from fairly early on, and well, fatigue wasn't a big part of that. Lots of depression and anxiety and post-trauma stuff as well. So the main kind of bedrock on which it was all built was just a terrifying amount of communication. If something was bothering me, I could voice it. If something was bothering them, I could voice it in various, boundaries, where they be personal or physical or whatever. It's about talking through things advanced, checking in a lot, and kind of starting to understand and recognize the patterns. And I got to cheat. I'm not having to deal with what the partners of a lot of people with long COVID are dealing with. Cal had been dealing with these issues for years and had already figured out a huge bunch of very good coping mechanisms. And it was my job just to learn them and maybe listen to what they had figured out, and in a bad moment suggest, you've said this has worked in the past before. How about that? And something I have noticed I do now for everyone is when I am completely out of ideas and there's nothing I know I can make anything better, I offer a cup of tea and we kind of sit with it and see where it'll go. So yeah, lots of communication. As the fatigue has become more of an issue and the mental health stuff has become less of an issue, I think it means that there's a lot of adaptation necessary. I'm sure people who are struggling with the fatigue sides of long COVID are fully aware of just how much it can swing from day to day and how difficult that makes it. And where you don't know if doing something is going to make you feel better or make you feel worse or all of that. And it's, for me, when we're doing things, it's about knowing what the potential problems might be and just checking in lots. It's all communication. And I don't plan very well anyway, so I'm very much an improviser. So if we get to a point and it's, no, I'm knackered, I'm not going to be able to do that. It's about shifting and changing what you're doing. And say you've gone and meet a friend for coffee and lunch and then walk back to the flat and then suddenly you're wiped and it's like whatever we had planned for the evening isn't going to work. Firstly, it's about communication between the two of you so that no one's going to be forced anything. Second, it's about, while it can be difficult, talking to your friends and the people around you about it so that hopefully when you say, look, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to do it, would we be able to arrange for another time? They'll have an idea what's going on and can be empathetic. But I think the big useful thing that I have learned is about having backups, about having, okay, we were going to go out and see a film or do something nice. No, we're not going to be able to do that. And not letting that become an awful spiral of misery and this kind of sense of that worry of things aren't going to get any better. or that it's just a constant frustration, having that backup in place where you can go, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to buy a couple of ice creams and we're just going to drive somewhere nice. We don't need to get out. We don't need to walk around. We're going to put on some music we like or a podcast or something and just drive. And it gives that feeling of getting out when the fatigue can have you feel trapped when something doesn't go right.
That's so true. I've certainly noticed it with the long COVID, and I'm sure a lot of chronic conditions have it in common, this element of unpredictability. Making plans is difficult because you just don't know how you're going to feel day to day.
Yes.
You might feel okay one day and then the next day you can't get out of your bed. And then you feel that pressure, don't you? You think, well, I said I would meet my friend, but I don't feel up to it. But maybe I should make myself do that, which is probably going to make things worse.
But then every so often it doesn't make things worse, or you do nothing and that somehow makes things worse. And it is the self-doubt that can foster. It really messes with your head.
Absolutely, yeah. You've touched on it. With something like long COVID, there are thousands of partners, husbands, wives, family members, or friends that have overnight become almost full-time carers in some cases to previously completely healthy people. You add to the fact that it's happened in the middle of a pandemic, which was already stressful. It's quite a big thing, and there are so many relationships that haven't survived that. Hopefully some of this will be helpful to people in that position, like we've found ourselves, my partner and I. Is there any advice that you could offer, maybe to both sides? We'll be right back. I'm interrupting myself for a second to tell you about long COVID breathing. The fabulous Vicky Jones and I have teamed up to bring you long COVID breathing. We are both passionate about sharing our expertise and experience of the breath and how incredibly helpful that can be with long COVID. We've worked together to develop a course that is specifically tailored to those with long COVID. It's a 6-week course with 12 sessions, all delivered online. The community feel and learning that we're all sharing is such a joy. To find out more information and to sign up for our courses, workshops and other shorter sessions, please check out the link below, longcovidbreathing.com, or email longcovidbreathing@gmail.com to start your breathing journey with us.
Sure. Yeah. Well, my advice to someone who's a partner of someone with long COVID would be, when you're doing the airplane safety thing, if oxygen fails in the cabin, the wee masks fall down, like put on your own mask first. And you go, well, what if my child's not got their mask on or someone's struggling? Or they say put on your own mask first because you're of no help to anyone. If you're worrying about everyone else's masks, then you collapse on the ground unconscious in the middle of the aisle. And I feel that while it might be counterintuitive, like looking after yourself is probably one of the best pieces of advice I can give. And finding out ways where you can both look after each other healthily. Like Cal early on was making sure that even in a bad spot, there were other friends we could call who Cal could go and hang out with. Or if I was feeling completely spent, I could go and take a day and clear my head or play some board games with my friends. And that's something that I almost certainly wouldn't have done by myself. That was something I needed encouraged to do. Also, it will be difficult and frustrating at times. And as a partner of someone without chronic illness, it can feel like you can't talk to anyone about it because if there are things that you find difficult, frustrating, you don't want to put that back on your partner. And that feels guilty and can make them feel worse. It's important that you have a kin-centric circle. The person with the illness is at the centre and can lean on the people around them, and then they can lean on the people around them to kind of chat and talk through their problems. And I'm not saying if there are issues you shouldn't discuss them, not at all, but having people you can talk to, and if you are someone with a chronic illness, encouraging your partner to be able to express their worries or troubles with it somewhere else. And while I completely understand that can feel very personal and knowing where the lines are for that, like that is something for you to discuss together, but I find that really helpful. That would be my main piece of advice. You can't look after your partner if you're not looking after yourself.
Yeah, because everybody needs support, don't they?
And yeah, making sure that you're both able to see friends or do things or find low energy alternatives to stuff, and where you both have your own spaces or where someone else can take up the slack for a bit.
I mean, in terms of medical support, I mean, a lot of the long COVID community feels very abandoned. I think a lot of, especially us first wavers, found because we got ill in the first wave, when everything was really, really bad and there were so many people that were more ill that we kind of got ignored at the time. And then because we were ignored at the time, we've kind of been ignored ever since. So that kind of feeling of abandonment, which is quite a difficult thing to deal with. And I know this ME and chronic fatigue sort of community have been feeling that for years, the sort of gaslighting and being ignored.
Yeah.
Have you and Cal felt that as well?
The lack of profanity in the podcast. So yeah, Cal has been on disability benefits and despite all of their best efforts, not able to work for 4 or 5 years now. And we have lots of pals with other disabilities. And the DWP, the Department for Work and Pensions, and this is my personal opinion, not the opinion of anything else, are an evil organization designed to deprive people of what they need to survive and maximize suffering. It is very, very difficult. And particularly with things like chronic fatigue, medical professionals don't often understand them. Like, I know that Cal has been trying to get help numerous times to the doctor, and it'll either be a new doctor who doesn't know what's going on, someone who will dismiss it as them making things up, or will not have any solutions, so try and pawn them off on other things. Like, there are loads and loads of alternate treatments that if people find useful for them, I fully encourage them. However, there is a huge amount of unscientific charlatanery that medical professionals or the system who are there to help often encourage. Cal has been encouraged to go and get homeopathy. And I apologize to any people who use homeopathic remedies. If they work for you, that is fantastic. But there is no evidence for them. And that is a doctor pawning you off and spending a lot of money on something that there is no evidence it will help. So there's been a lot of anger on that. There are not a lot of support systems, and this is something I'm sure a lot of people with long COVID haven't had to go through yet. When you're on ESA or PIP, which are two of the old systems, personal independence payments, and I should know these, or if you're on universal credit, if you're ill, non-disability as a result, yearly assessments, and they are demeaning and horrible, and they will look for any excuse to take you off them, even if you would probably die as a result. Like, Cal has another friend who's thankfully more experienced with the DWP and has been to the assessments with Cal. And there is lots of things like, it's important that you have someone take you along, because if you go by yourself, they will take it as evidence that you can make an appointment and be on time and mark that massively against you. And if you miss it, just go, well, they missed their appointment, stuff them. And it is a horrible system designed to catch people out. All Tory ministers are welcome to sue me.
Yeah. I mean, there are certainly people with long COVID that have been applying for the PIP, and the ESA was the other one you mentioned, wasn't it? I've seen people talking about that and asking for advice because, what do you do when your sick pay runs out?
Yeah.
That's what's left, isn't it?
So there are loads of, depending on where you are, local places that can help. Have a look around what services are in your local area, like Citizens Advice Bureau, although they're incredibly, overworked and understaffed, are good. And there are places online that can help you out if you've got DWP stuff coming up. If you're a member of a union, people in there may know. Or reach out to disabled communities online, because this will be a fairly universal experience. And for some things, like my cousin has Down syndrome, and the battle for her benefits isn't the same, because that's something that it's very hard for them to be able to say, oh, well, this doesn't really exist. As something like fatigue or mental health or long COVID, they might be.
Yeah, there's a history there, isn't there, of things like ME and chronic fatigue, and now long COVID to some extent, and mental health problems, because they're sort of invisible conditions, aren't they, that it's very easy to say, oh, well, you're just making that up.
Yeah.
And I guess the fluctuation, unpredictability thing as well means that if you have your assessment on a day where you're actually feeling not too bad, but at the same time, the day before, you actually couldn't get out of bed.
Yeah.
And they don't see that.
Yeah, if you answer the questions as if it's on a good day, they will treat you like every day is a good day.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've all realised that the system is not fit for purpose, which I guess is something that you and Cal have known for a long time.
Yes, I've become a much angrier man in the last few years. Yeah.
You guys have been dealing with this for longer than long COVID existed. I think you've already talked through some strategies for helping and coping.
The other good piece of advice I think I can give is a useful role you can be as a partner to someone who has long COVID or other chronic conditions is like, I often perform the role of social buffer. I know Cal isn't going to be able to say, look, I'm knackered, I need to leave. So it is worth me checking in. And often, particularly after a year and a half of everyone being locked inside to various degrees, like having systems in place. This is something I talk about in my teaching all the time. There's no point in banging your head against the wall. It's often worth coming up with a way around. So very early on in our relationship, Cal was feeling panicky and not able to get out of a social situation. And afterwards we talked about it and we said, okay, next time Cal is feeling panicky and needs out, but feels unable to say it, they will hold my hand and squeeze my pinky. And that was the signal for me that they wanted out and to do the social smoothing over necessary. In the 3 years since then, we have never needed to use that. But even the knowledge that is there helps provide security. So if there is something you are uncomfortable with or something that's putting you on edge, often just having a system in place will make things seem easier. What's an example? Going to some friends tonight with Cal to watch a film, hang out. I know Cal's got stuff on in the morning. And Cal is very bad at being able to assert the boundaries with people who aren't partners, more or less. So I know it's for me to kind of check in or find a moment or provide the social warnings that we may need to go. And this is not a go on, have another drink situation. It's actually, no, we need to be able to have our boundaries to kind of keep things going.
I mean, I think something that we've noticed as well, Malky and I, is that he is often a much better judge of how I'm feeling than I am. He can take one look at me and think, you're knackered, you need to sit down, or you're not having a good day. Whereas sometimes I'll almost kid myself into thinking, yeah, I can do that. And I don't realise the effect of it until afterwards when it's too late.
Yeah, and a lot of it's trial and error as well. Why I think I've got a very good intuitive understanding now of how Cal's doing. A lot of that has come from me having seen that situation before and we've done the wrong thing. Me having seen that situation before and we've tried something out and to our surprise, it's worked great. So it's a tricky one.
Yeah, and like you say, you're not going to come upon a solution necessarily straight away. You might try some things that don't work so well, and at least then you know not to do them again.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, clearly things are awful for those suffering with chronic illness, whether it's long COVID or something else. But we mentioned earlier, a lot of people will forget that those close to them have also had their lives turned upside down.
It does affect everyone's life around you, but it's also really important to acknowledge that none of this is your fault and none of this is something that could have been expected. And it could have happened to any of us. And it's important that we all help out those who were unfortunate enough to have it happen to them. One other thing I wanted to kind of say is that something that I think is really important for everyone is it's okay for it to be terrible now and then. It's very important that, particularly if you've got something that you're dealing with for a long time, occasionally, when the mood takes you, it's important to be able to say, this is terrible, this is awful, insert profanity here, I don't like it. It doesn't need to be all making the best of a bad situation all the time. It's a really good valve to be able to let off, to have a rant about it and kind of complain and get that frustration out, because it is hard and it is terrible and it's not worth just holding that all in until it bursts. And this goes for everyone involved. This goes for the person who has the illness, the partners. It is difficult. And I would say one of the hardest things is not knowing at what speed or how it might get better. Often when you hit against a problem, your mind can circle back to that place of, when is this going to get better? How is this going to get better? Everything is awful. And it's about allowing that frustration when it's helpful and healthy, but also either knowing as a person going through it yourself or as a partner, ways to spot that spiral early and kind of distract from that or go into another topic, because sometimes talking about it doesn't help. Sometimes talking about it when you're having a good time is just going to make you feel awful.
Yes. And I guess with experience, you know when those times are helpful and when they're not.
Yeah, I'm not always right, but I think I do pretty well.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I guess I'm asking you from the perspective of being the one who's not ill, but I feel a huge amount of guilt that my partner has changed his life. And as much as he says, oh, no, it's not that different, it is. It's not what he signed up for. And yet he's been really, really awesome. But I still feel bad about it. Can you offer any advice on that from your perspective?
Sure. First of all, same as that, you're allowed to feel frustration. You're allowed to feel guilt. These things with feelings are important. I'm not saying you're correct to feel guilt in any way, but you're allowed going, I feel guilty, and then going, oh, I feel guilty. I can't express it, or this is terrible, or yeah, lots of communication is a big help. And from the perspective of our relationship, when Cal is feeling guilty, all the time we talk about it, and something that helps with that sense of guilt is the both of you helping to support each other to have your own boundaries, or making sure that it's not all-consuming for either of you. So, for example, if I'm planning to go out with some friends, and this has been in the diary for a while, I haven't seen them in a while, and Cal is having a really bad day, finding ways to make sure I can still go and see my friends, making sure I can still do my thing. We're not both trapped in it, but often that involves bringing in other people and making sure that they've got someone to hang out with or something else to do. And it's about that sense of guilt can be, I think, assuaged by trying to make sure that you both have healthy ways of managing those boundaries and looking after each other. And also, this is more our personal dynamic, but you are feeling guilty. I understand, but tough. Yes, it might make certain things more difficult, but I am here for this and here for the relationship that we're in. And even when it's a bad day, I love the time I spend with Cal. And even if that's because I know I can make things a bit better. And I would argue, and this is definitely an insensitive thing to argue for some people, if you are committing to a relationship or a long-term relationship with someone and something goes wrong, someone gets a chronic illness, just something bad happens, you're not signing up to that relationship with them as long as everything's lovely, as long as everything's nice and not difficult. You're a team. You're here to work through things and get through things together. And you're allowed to feel guilty, and it is allowed to be difficult. And the only way we get through it is with lots of communication and teamwork. And knowing the team is not just the two of you, but the other people around who are there to help as well.
Yeah, it's coming back to that. Everybody needs some support, doesn't it? You know,
I'm so good at podcasting. That reintegration from the start is just masterful. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. You know, and I guess, and, you know, not just that you also need support, that maybe Cal needs somebody else that they can lean on some of the time when you need to do your thing.
Yeah. And I think that's an important thing to kind of emphasize is chronic fatigue in particular is a really isolating condition because you get stuck not being able to do things or not being able to see people, and it really shrinks your window of things you can do, and you can make the best efforts as you can not to be socially isolated as well as isolated in things you can do, because from what Cal has told me, it's the isolation that does the lasting damage. It's the isolation that can make things really difficult, and trying to make sure we've got that kind of community where we're helping each other out together, reach out to each other and make chronic illness friends, but also be aware that ranting to someone who's going through the same thing as you about how hard it is can often bum them out. So be careful. Communication, boundaries, team.
Yes. And things like support groups as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
As much as, you know, a very supportive partner, as you obviously are, you know, is amazing and, you know, really helpful and completely invaluable. But sometimes you want to talk to somebody that gets it from the same way that you get it. And as much as a partner will get it from having seen it, they've not experienced it in quite the same way.
Yeah. And I can't ever claim to get what Cal has been through.
There maybe would be useful if partners could speak to each other as well, because, like we've said, they are also going through something.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if such a thing exists, a support group for partners.
Yeah.
Would be quite useful. I
have no idea. If you have any burning questions, please feel free to reach out to Jackie, and I'm sure she'll pass them on. Or just if you want to rant, that's fine. I am bad at responding to emails, but no, I'll read them and feel bad for not responding.
I can confirm that.
As Jackie has done a project with me at work in the test, I am bad at responding to emails, and I apologise.
Oh, well, thank you so much for imparting your wisdom.
Thank Cal for imparting it onto me first. But yeah, absolutely.
Well, yes, exactly. The both of you, you've obviously got something going that really works. And I think a lot of people with long COVID and a lot of people who know somebody with long COVID can definitely take something from that. And if not, you're entertaining to listen to.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much to all of my guests and to you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it, or at least found it useful. The Long COVID podcast is entirely self-produced and self-funded. I'm doing all of this myself. If you're able to, please go to buymeacoffee.com/longcovidpod to help me cover the costs of hosting the podcast. Please look out for the next episode of the Long COVID podcast. It's available on all the usual podcast hosting things. And do get in touch